I'm Jon Buchanan. Now, if you watch this channel with any regularity, you will know that I'm actually an advocate of the loop library, which is unusual, I think, for people who are Logic owners. I think we often open that up and discover that the first few sounds are called 12/8 acoustic strum and think that probably that content isn't for us. I can't think why. Okay, but I also think that within the loop library there is some fantastic stuff, and I think that we've made some pretty good stuff with it over the course of many episodes on this channel. And that's what I want you to keep in mind, while I also want you to keep in mind that the other day I was revisiting one of my favourite artists, Jon Hopkins, and I was thinking, you know what, I think there's a video to make about the amazing way in which he makes techno from bits of audio, bits of loops, bits of stuff that he's kind of messed around with, where everything is kind of mined and shaped and changed and sort of turned into little jigsaw pieces. Rather than using the whole of loops, what it sounds to me like he does is to find bits and pieces of audio that are really compelling, that have been kind of smashed together in interesting ways, and that he also really blurs the lines, and that he also really blurs the lines between what's pitched and what's rhythmic. In other words, what we have is this kind of rhythmical stuff made out of things that have got some pitch components to them as well. In other words, his beats have got kind of groove and pitch and everything in them. And I wondered whether or not we might take today to make a track a little bit like that. And along the way, I think we'll learn some interesting things about how to mine great sounds from the loop library. We're not going to be starting with 12/8 acoustic strum 01. It's just not that day. What it is a day for, however, is to come to the instrument library and to come to beats. And personally, I tend to find that when I select the tech house beats, I tend to find some things that I like a little bit quicker than in some of the other house collections. That's just my personal taste, I guess, a little bit. And what I'm always sort of drawn to, I suppose, a little bit, are the sorts of names of things that I think are going to be a little bit kind of interesting. And bearing in mind, I am sort of talking about some stuff that is going to be kind of, I hope, kind of jittery and interesting and something that we can chop up and make kind of little things out of. I suppose I'm looking for names that suggest things like that. So, for example, what does coin machine beat sound like? I'm kind of hoping, my brain is hoping, that this sound has got some things that are going to sound a bit jittery, like putting a coin in a slot. Is that too much to hope for? Well, no, it's not quite what I hoped it would be, but I do think there are some things in here that are going to be interesting. So, of course, what happens when we drag and drop a loop across? Because it's the first thing within our project, Logic's just going to assume that I want to work at the tempo of the original loop, which, as it turns out, I really don't. And, of course, as we well know by now, one of the huge advantages of working with the content from the loop library is that we can change tempo and the audio will auto-stretch, often bringing in some artifacts, which sometimes can be really good. Okay, so I'm going to stay there. I'm leaving that beat there, but I definitely don't want this to be the kick of this sound. The bits of this that I'm interested in are the bits that fall in between the gaps of the kick. So far at the moment, all I'm doing is going and finding some things that I hope and think are going to be quite interesting. What else might be within this list that is going to be good? Just looking down the list of things, I'm going to try not to take all of your time simply looking through menus. Grandfather clock beat. That's just a massive disappointment, isn't it? Let's keep going. I don't love that either, although there's something right at the end of it. That tiny little flick out on the left-hand side, which is right there at the end, I'm wondering about that bit. Was it worth waiting for the 2-bar loop to come around just to hear that happen? I think it was. I think you're locked in with me now, aren't you? Good. Okay, so maybe a thing like that. And this is the first little clue, really. It's these sorts of moments that I'm looking out for. Tiny little bits and pieces of stuff that I think we can make some interesting things out of, but probably not only if they're a 16th note long. So let's just keep going. Just going to keep going down here through this list a little bit more. Here we go, machine language. Hello, you. Okay, let's bring that in. Now, this is the sort of sound that I'm talking about. This is a sort of loop. I think we can get some interesting things going here. So what I like about this groove, again, isn't the kick. It's too easy to start there. I always think if you just put a kick in, it's going to just throw a blanket over everything else. I tried to sort of set myself the challenge of seeing if I can make a bit of a groove out of everything else first, and then of course going for the satisfaction of putting a kick drum under it and seeing what happens with that when we start knitting everything together. So the first thing I'm going to do with this groove, before I even start mining it for the moments that I think are going to be interesting, is I'm going to do the next thing that we can do when we're working with audio from the loop library, which is that I'm actually going to quantize it. But rather than quantizing it in quantizing it, where did that word come from? Instead of quantizing it in regular 16th notes, I'm going to bring in a bit of a swing value. And what that's going to do is to give us this nice little kind of warped thing. And if I select that, what's going to happen is that straight away that loop is going to change and become a 16th note. And we can see what that's done. If we open up the flex editing options and we go to slicing, we're going to discover that that 16th note choice, the 16D, is moving all of what's happening on the second and fourth 16th notes late. So whereas this bit of audio I suspect probably landed on this line before, by being quantized, that's now coming here, whereas of course the main downbeat is now still arriving on the main downbeat, on the backbeat. And we're just getting that little bit of detail that's coming from this little groove above, which I like as well, which I'm also going to slice and quantize into 16D, and that's now going to be happening. Now, what's nice about this little thing is it kind of emerges out of the rest of this pattern, and I quite like that. I'm kind of interested just to see if we bring in a tiny bit more of it, but maybe what we do is to put a fade on it. Now, at the moment, because I'm inside Flex View, I'm seeing all of the little transient markers that are showing me where things fall. I don't really want to see those. I just want to get back to the regular waveform. So I'm going to hide the flex options. That doesn't mean they've been switched off. It just means I'm back to working with the waveforms in the way that I want to. And I just want to see what happens if that kind of fades in underneath the bit at the end. And I like that. That's just giving us a little bit of something a bit different at the end. Now, I've mentioned the fact that I don't want to use the kick drum for this sound. So which bits am I kind of interested in? Well, I think I'm sort of interested in all of the bits that aren't the kick drum. In other words, what I'm going to do is to chop here, and I'm going to chop, I might just see what that little moment is there. Something weird has happened with the way that it's been sort of flexed, and that's potentially exciting. So I'm going to just do that time. I'm going to leave that in there. But what I'm then going to do is to throw away that beat and that beat. I'm going to do the same thing. We're only 2 beats in so far. I'm going to just make sure that in the next kind of beat, I'm using even less of it. You can go away. And then what I'm going to do is just to see what happens with that. Okay, so for now, what I'm going to do is to throw away all of the rest of that. Remember, it's a repeating bar long loop anyway. And I've probably got more here than I need. I'm just interested to see what this sounds like chopped up. Okay, what I'm going to do, I like that. We're getting somewhere here. I'm going to make that really short, and I think I'm going to lose that hi-hat too. In fact, if I just kept the hi-hat and lost the bit I wanted, let's try it the other way around. Okay, so in fact, there is an immediately quite easy variation. I'm going to take all of this and copy it into the next bar. And what I'm going to do is to go and find that hi-hat that I got rid of a moment ago. In fact, there's a little bit of something else there. I'm going to get rid of it that time. And the second time round, I'm also going to get rid of what's happening at the beginning of beat 1 of that bar. So what we've got now is less that time round. But maybe what we'll do is just to use a tiny bit more of this. Remember, that is a kick drum. And I don't want a kick drum. In fact, so I've just opened that up and I've closed the door on it all over again. You'll sometimes find with flex that that as you move things around from a start and finish point of view, it almost looks like they're moving left and right. That's okay, just chase them away. Chase them away. What I'm then going to do is to select all of these, and I'm going to put a little fade in on the front. Each of these regions can have a little 5-second fade in and a millisecond fade out. Imagine that was actually 5 seconds. I think we'd never actually get to hear anything because, of course, these are all tiny. So these little offsets that I've put in there, that's 5 milliseconds of fade in and 20 milliseconds of fade out. And that just means that anything that might be clicking because of where I've cut into it will stop clicking. Okay, now what I'm going to do is to mute it. Rather than simply getting seduced by hearing that over and over and over again, I'm going to come back to my original coin machine beat. And again, without thinking too carefully, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm only interested in what's happening in the gaps. And it looks to me like the waveform is going to tell us some useful things here. There is nothing much happening in the gap there between beat 1 and 2, whereas this looks a bit more interesting to me. And that little tiny spike of audio there, I have no idea what it is, but that definitely appeals to me as well. So what I'm going to do again is just using control to really make sure that I can get on the bits of waveform that I want. We're in good shape. And look, second time round, there are new things in those gaps. That's very exciting. It's like Christmas Day, only better. Who knows? We're about to find out. So what I'm going to do is to get rid of that and that and that. I'll stop saying and that, just to make life easier for you. And of course, what I haven't done yet is to quantize this with my 16th note swing D options. And what I also haven't done is to put in my little bits of fade. So again, let's make that. I'm just wondering actually about that. In fact, instead of doing that with the fade in values there, I'm going to make sure that all of those regions, which are more or less the same length, are all selected. And what I'm going to do is to draw a fade in on one of them. And that's going to therefore apply it to all of them because they're all highlighted. And I'm going to do the same thing right on the end. And again, that will add a fade out to all of them too. Let's try that with the other loop. Okay, we now do, I think, need a kick, which is going to come in and just provide some context for all of this. Now, again, it would be easy to just go and find a loop, drag and drop it and play it all the way through, but I do just want a kick, only a kick. So we're still going to be mining and doing some interesting things, but this time we're only mining for a kick drum. And there is one that I've used before that I do like, which is called Atomic Garage Beat 01. I don't like its name, but I do like its kick. You can sing along too if you want to. Now, of course, I don't want any of that vocal. I don't want any of that stuff. I do just want this beat. In fact, actually, just while I'm here. Even better, a much more isolated sound. So we've got no hats here, which is better. So we're going to go with the second version of this. And I think isolating the kick drum is going to be really easy because I think the first one's pretty clean. In fact, the first two are pretty clean. In fact, I think that's pretty much exactly the same sound and we're in good shape. Now, one thing to say is you might already be thinking, why wouldn't you just load loads of stuff from Drum Machine Designer and go looking for new sounds? Well, you can absolutely do that. But there is definitely something that feels a bit more sampled working this way because these loops haven't just been curated, they've been kind of passed through compressors and they've probably been limited and they've been sort of mastered, for want of a better phrase. They've got that kind of post-process sound, which is usually what people will be using as source material when they're grabbing sounds like this from samples. If you were sampling a kick drum from a record, it would have been through all of those processes. So yes, that gets you to that sound a little bit faster, but it does also feel pretty idiomatic of the way that a lot of techno gets made. Okay, let's have a listen to this now with a kick drum added as well. And what I'm also going to do, I like that, is I'm going to just turn down the volume of the machine language stuff. I like it, but it's kind of chirping away a little bit more loudly than I'd like it to be. I think I'm going to give a little bit of a level boost, however, to this stuff. And instead of doing that with the fader, I've only got 6 dB of headroom, remember. Instead, what I'm going to do is to grab all of these bits, and I'm going to do a little bit of a gain offset here. In fact, look, the gain is set at currently minus 8.3, which happened when I dragged this loop in. Remember, originally this loop has got a loud kick drum in it, but not anymore. So all of this now can definitely kind of come up, I think, from a gain perspective. Let's just turn that up literally as much as maybe even as 5 dB. And what that's doing is slowly revealing that there's a bit of a flam happening between those two sounds. And it's nice, and I like it, I think, but I just wonder if it might be cleaner without that one. Or maybe it would be cleaner without that one. This is the joy of working like this, is that we can just experiment with both options. I'm kind of missing the smudge, but I don't want it to happen both times. So what I'm going to do is to copy this to the equivalent gap over here so that it happens here instead. Let's just see what that sounds like. I like that. There's a little flam that's happening there that I think is really interesting. Okay, so I've mentioned the idea that what I like about Jon Hopkins' record so much is it feels like some of the synth parts are also kind of baked into the way that the groove works, that we've got something which feels like there's a pitched element to it that feels exciting and interesting and kind of part of the overall feel. So what I'm going to do is come back to the loops library. I'm going to come, in fact, look, it looks like in closing it, I've reset all of those settings. That's fine. I'm going to stay in a kind of tech housey place, but this time I'm going to come to synths. And again, what I'm looking for here is some stuff that is just going to give us a little bit of something without giving us an entire pattern. Normally when we click on this stuff, of course, it's just going to play loads of stuff. And I'm not interested in any of that. What I want to do is just have something which is just a little bit less full and obviously loopy. Again, I'm just kind of listening for moments rather than the whole of sequences. Also no, but not quite so much of a disaster. I don't like the way it opens up, but that first little note might have been quite interesting, but we're moving on. Absolutely not. Go away, never come back. And normally this is the moment where you probably give up or stop watching. Don't do that. And then something like that turns up. Now, again, you might be thinking, John, are you mad? It's too much. And you're quite right. It is too much. But that last bit might not be too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just chop this right there and right there. And we're going to get rid of all of that and all of that. And we're going to just see what happens when we put a little fade in on this bit right at the end. And we make sure we put a tiny fade out so that it doesn't click. Okay, so look, I'm interrupting, but just to tell you briefly that this episode's a total banger. Stay to the end, because what happens at the end is unbelievable. Okay, so listen, I'm just interrupting for a moment to tell you about learn.johnbuchananmusic.com, where there is more of everything. If you like what we do on YouTube, and in fact, if you've watched every single episode, then you are as insatiable for this music production experience as I am. you're one of my people. I think you're going to discover that the kind of more that we have on the website, the courses that are there, which are going to take deeper dives into all aspects of music production, are going to be right up your street. So go and have a look, see what's there. And if you sign up via the mailing list, you'll be the first to know about loads of the really exciting stuff that we've got coming in the next few months as well. Okay, back to finding out how this episode ends. Intriguing. Okay, so straight away now, getting rid of most of that sequence, we've now suddenly got a little moment that's introducing some pitch that feels like it's doing something quite good. And we're learning to listen past the kind of ear-catchy, look, I'm doing something every 16th note kind of thing, which is always boring. Okay, let's keep going. This time again, I'm going to see, a magical chime synth, might that be a thing? It's making me think of Orbital. And now it's not. No. No, absolutely not. And this, of course, is why most people don't use the Apple loops, because, of course, they're just trying too hard. Let's keep going. So again, the thing about that I like is that little moment of noise. Which is again right at the end. I wonder if that is going to double nicely with this. Now it's worth remembering that not only, of course, will content like this sync up nicely from a timing perspective, it should, of course, regulate the kind of tonality of this track. And because I've started from a completely empty track, I'm not trying to make these notes fit in tune with anything other than themselves. Obviously, if you've started a track and you like this idea, you might need to repitch these as well, which of course you can do by just tuning them up here at the top or sampling them and triggering them from a keyboard instead. I really like that little pitch thing that's happening there. Right at the end, and I wonder whether or not we might also use that sound at the end of the first bar, but without that little blip on the end. And I'm now going to just move that back to there. So I've just, again, moved that back, and we could use the slip tool to do that, to go in there and find the bit of audio we want to use as well. But that feels a bit nicer. And again, it would be possible to put that on another track and add a filter to it, or of course, just automate the filter. All these little ideas that are coming as a result of bringing that in. So now we've got some kind of synths that are doing some obviously pitchy things. But again, going back to the Jon Hopkins thing, not only, of course, are kicks going to be tuned, but he's just the king of working with sub bass. And I like the idea of bringing some sub to this as well. And in fact, I have just been doing a little bit of experimenting, and I found two sounds that I think are going to be quite interesting. Now, firstly, I want them obviously to provide a kind of pitch foundation, but also what I want to do is to add more complexity to the kind of rhythm world as well. Remember, we're working with this kind of 16D swing value, and I think we're going to be applying that to the subs as well. So the first one of those that I found that I like, just to save you having to just have me say no the whole time, which I feel like I've been doing quite a lot recently, is within the bass instruments within Tech House, there is this sub sound called drum machine bass, which I'm just going to drag and drop and put over here. And you can see these little throbs of bass that are going to be just kind of brought to the mix straight away. Now, before I even press play, I'm going to turn the volume down a fair bit. If you are listening through your laptop speakers, firstly, shame on you. Secondly, you're just not going to hear this. So there you go. Don't say you weren't warned. If you are listening on studio monitors, you're really going to hear this. I really like that. Okay, and the other sound that I found is down towards the bottom of this list. of subparts 2, and these are going to work together. This one is called Rattle the Roof Bass, and goodness me, imagine sticking around for long enough for me to have got all the way down this list before I got to that sound. This would be a very long video, and you would have grown old. We'd have grown old together, and that would have been a beautiful thing, but nevertheless. Okay, now as you can see, there are some moments within this waveform where these two sounds overlap, and exactly the same way that we did with the drums, that means that I'm not interested in any moments from this second bass line where that overlap happens. So I'm going to just chop all of those out. I'm not going to use that one either, or that one. But what I might do here is to chop right in the middle of those two notes and do an interesting thing. So firstly, what I need to do is to make sure that I'm also applying our quantized value once again to this sound so that we just get the bits that we want. Sure enough, something interesting has happened there now. And what I'm going to do is to throw that section away. In fact, I'll mute it for now. And I'm going to do the same thing there. And then what I want to do is to just see what happens when I merge these two sounds, put them on the same track, and maybe what we do is we just crossfade between them. Now, here's the fade tool. I'm going to just draw a little line across there and we'll just see what that sounds like. Okay, so here are the two sub bass parts by themselves. Again, the second one is going to be too loud relative to the first. Let's just have a listen. Okay, so the sub's too loud. It's a hell of a time for me to say that, isn't it? Have I just blown your windows out? Is there a disclaimer on the channel, Will? Okay, sorry. So what we're going to do is we're going to put those in a track stack. Here is our sub track stack. I'm going to put that in here and I'm going to call it sub bass. What I'm going to do, maybe a little late, is to put a high pass filter on those, and we're just going to lose, I don't know, let's say 35-ish hertz downwards. It's not going to make an enormous difference, but it will make some. Okay, it's high time here. We had some colour. I know you've been feeling like you've been short of oxygen. I understand. Same thing going on here. So our subs are going to be purple because of course they are. The synths are going to be, I don't know, they feel kind of sort of purpley too, but of a different hue. And then what we're going to do is to make sure that all of the beats are, of course, blue, and breathe, everything is now fine. Phew. Although the synths look too close to the blue. Yeah. Okay, now, of course, the one thing that we don't really have yet is hats. Now, I've done that on purpose. I definitely find that the energy that comes from super high end is, again, really seductive. It's like finding those synth patterns that are calling your attention because they're bright and they're shiny and they're full of reverb and they're exciting. And it means that you kind of stop listening for the details in things. And I think the moment we add a hi-hat pattern that's doing something busy in every single beat of the bar, it's really easy for that to obscure absolutely everything else. But I would like more hats than I have right now. I've got a couple of little moments from the kind of machine language loop, I think, and the kind of combination of the two things right up at the top. But I want something which is just, again, a little bit more interesting, that's just providing a little bit of extraness for us. So I'm going to come back out of the kind of bass section. Let's come out of there and come back into beats. We're staying in a tech house place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to search for topper loops. These are, as their name suggests, and as we've discovered on the channel before, sounds that are only based in high frequency content. So no kicks, usually no snares. So we're talking about kind of claps, percussion, high end stuff. And again, there is a loop here that I found that I think might be quite useful, which is called super late topper. And by itself, it sounds like this. Again, too busy, too much. Now, to make the point that I was making before, if you use a loop like this in its entirety, it's going to sound fine, particularly obviously if I quantize it and I get it to swing with everything else. And we get a lot of energy that way, so much in fact that we're starting to overload the output. We'll address that in just a moment. But I don't want this number of hats. I want something which feels far more just kind of considered and, I don't know, just something that just feels smaller. So I definitely want a little bit of an injection of speed at the beginning, but maybe what I want to do is to get rid of this guy here and the one in the gap. Maybe what we'll do on beat 3 is to allow ourselves this little kind of moment where that's going to coincide with the kick drum, just that time. And again, we'll have all of that pattern, but maybe that time we'll only have that one all the way through to the bar line. Fine. Now, what I quite like to do, actually, I think that's going to be too much, but we'll see. What I quite like to do is to create one bar or two maybe, and then copy all of those moments across to the equivalent positions in the next bar, and then to make those patterns different. So in fact, I am going to curate a little bit less here. We're going to lose that one. I'm also going to make that smaller that time. Although actually I think I want that one and not that one. What I'm going to do as well is to abridge it there. That was just an opportunity to use the word abridge. And maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that so that it happens also just before beat 4. I think that's working quite nicely. Okay, these are obviously also going to be blue. Light percussion, high percussion tends to be a lighter blue for me. And what I like to do is to make sure that things are together. So those are all the drums together. Now at the moment, I'm making a 2-bar loop. And of course, the easiest thing in the world to do would be make this a 4-bar loop. And of course, that immediately means that we can go and use different slices, different bits, different places, if you like. So again, I can see that I've muted this one. We could bring that in the second time around. And then what sometimes is quite interesting is just to, without thinking too hard, make little adjustments to the bits of audio waveform that you can see. You know that you're trying to avoid using kicks if you can help it. I might just let a tiny bit of that one happen. We can mute out little moments, delete things, and again, without thinking too carefully, what we can do is just to make little variations to things as well. I'm going to just bring a couple of extra little bits in this second time round too. And what I'm going to do is just to see what happens if we make variations to the hats as well, so that we're just making different choices the second time around. And I'm kind of doing this without thinking too hard. And what I might also do would be to do a little bit of a pitch offset. I'm going to transpose this little bit of synth, so it's gone up 5 semitones the second time around. And what I might also do is occasionally on our main kick, the second time around, I'm going to vary the length of these from a decay perspective. And what I mean by that is I don't actually have a decay control per se, but what I'm going to do is just to make a couple of these a little bit shorter, just so we're getting a bit of variation. And I'm going to put fades on those so that each of them just changes in length. Now, of course, anything that I do that I end up not liking, of course, I'm just in a position to undo. But what that's going to do is to give us some immediate variation the second time around. thought about that transposition, and then I thought better of it. So you can begin to see that the loop library is capable of really interesting things, provided what you're doing is applying a really critical ear to the bits that you like, and also that you're listening out for moments rather than entire sequences. And of course, we could keep going. I've scratched the surface of this, and of course, you would make different choices about which bits to retain, which bits to use, but you can begin to see that through a combination of being careful, but also applying some chance, what we can end up with some really interesting grooves. And of course, over the top of this, I'm in a position to add any new parts of my own as well. And in case you're thinking, please fix the headroom issue, of course, I can dive in here at any given moment, select all of these tracks and just drop their volume down a little bit, and we'll make sure that we're not peaking. And that's a good idea too. But certainly what we've now got, I think, is the beginning of a track, having just used this kind of sampled approach, these jigsaw pieces of audio, and now we're up and running with a brand new idea.